And kind of, what makes this virus so hard to understand and deal with, especially, those playing, armchair epidemiologists trying to follow these numbers and understand them. There's a latency effect. What we're seeing right now, our cases or deaths today, is a result of what happened 2 weeks ago. And so I'm not saying don't be alarmed, but don't be surprised that if you're gonna see cases numbers getting worse for the next 2 weeks, and then hopefully we can start getting better. What do sports look like on the other side of this? That's an active discussion from the state. I would assume, we would treat this, or this will be a lot like June, when we turn back in kind of a dial back approach. So where we're coming in some really localized practices, or, without large scale competition and tournaments. When that would happen, I don't know. It's the numbers kind of have to flesh themselves out, and that decision will be made at the governor's office. But really all these measures are put in place in, again, it's effective Friday night at 11:59 p.m. So that's the 20th. And this extends through December 18th at 11:59 p.m. So we're looking at these 4 weeks. I would expect, and give you the expectation that we'll probably be returning in some limited fashion. I think a really good and ideal scenario would be to come after the first of the year back to competition. Now, I don't have any specific information to say that, but that's me reading the tea leaves. I've been kind of sticking with this for, since March. So I think that's my best educated guess. I'm open in the chat for any questions or anything anybody has. Again, this is pretty clear cut. Unlike, some of our meetings in the past where we're kind of sorting through the guidelines, how to, what if, who do I quarantine? Right now, I just urge everybody to stay home. I mean, honestly, I would, I'd love to be having wings and a beer right now, but that's not our reality. And it's unfortunate. And especially coming into the holiday season when, it feels like it's 11:30 at night when it's only 5:30. I get that this is a tough time, but this is a time to band together. I mean, we are really, really trying to do this to preserve our ability to be playing in January, February, and March.
Jayme, you want to just say something about, the ability for a sport to be proactive? And I know we've talked about it at these meetings about multiple sports coming together to make sure to establish these appropriate requirements and almost consequences when we come back in. And just maybe the thoughts that you've had and what could be done by this collective community.
Yeah, and so, these are just stories. I don't have data, but like how we've gotten here in some ways is, a lot of us have done the right thing, but there's a unfortunate amount of us who haven't when it comes to either easy stuff like going to practice or games while awaiting results on a test, showing up while symptomatic, kind of broader problems of teams ignoring quarantine or avoiding misleading contact tracers and allowing for spread. What I know MYAS and Dawson and Minnesota hockey, especially Minnesota hockey's looking at putting together some pretty strict regulations coming out of this, especially with how to cooperate with contact tracers, how to self-isolate, where we've seen this happen, and it's really, really frustrating where you'll have someone show up and they have symptoms, and if they just stayed home, their whole team would have been able to continue playing. But either that message didn't reach, or and I'm not admonishing too much, where it's really easy to think that it's something else, but this isn't the time to try to play physician at home. This is the time if you got symptoms, just stay home. Of course, extending to your personal lives and just knowing how you're dealing with COVID, you are infectious 2 days and start experiencing. So the really difficult piece here is, even if we're doing everything right, that already exists. 2 days before you have a symptom, you are, you're infectious. So unfortunately, there were instances, and I'm often health emails, working with these broad organizations, trying to make them police themselves. MDH does not want to get in the business of requiring, getting you in trouble when you don't quarantine. But I'll take that message to the state body, for example, hockey, and have them deal with it. So we're going to be coming out on the other end of this with a stick on how to deal with this. And again, it seems easy to explain it to a bunch of team sport people, but it's always, I'm at a loss for words when it fails that, we all hold our collective future together. And it only takes a couple of us to really, ruin it for us. An example, for example, Rochester, you might have saw that they shut down on Sunday, and they're shutting down U Sports. And there's a few things that weren't going to work there. Instantly when they shut down, they had a number of sports organizations start scheduling time at other facilities in other counties. So already they're just spreading it somewhere else and implicating another community. And two, at the county and even state level, we're getting to the point where contact tracers were so far behind in being able to keep up with cases that, I know of teams that should have self-isolated, and I can't say why they didn't, whether they didn't know or purposefully ignored it and just continued playing. And then all of a sudden they'd get shut down 10 days later, and then you find out there were 3 cases that ended up popping up, and they infected more teams. And we were just at a point where contact tracers weren't keeping up. Teams were getting shut down in sports at a rapid rate. And once this started hitting the healthcare facilities and police and firefighters, and the community spread so high, we kind of got to enough is enough. And that's where we are right now. So, I don't have any authority being at the Amateur Sports Commission. I'm an avid fan of youth sports and everything it does and the experiences it can provide. And I just want to keep sports going so we can continue to provide those to kids right now, because it is very important to have that opportunity. I'm a public health guy, and I think sports for youth is the avenue to public health. That's how you get there, and we as a collective community have to be looking out for our future, those kids, and be able to provide those opportunities. And we've dropped the ball once, and we're getting an opportunity over the next 4 weeks to get the chance to get that ball back. And I just urge you all to take this seriously, understanding that there's the political thoughts all over the horizon, but unfortunately the virus doesn't care what party you belong to, doesn't believe what you want. I mean, what the virus wants is you not to change your behavior. So it's not a sentient being, it's something you can't see. It's time to tighten up. And I know that's really tough with the holidays coming up. Try to keep your Thanksgiving tight. We're having that same conversation in my household. This is not easy. I have a family in Iowa, and they have all different thoughts and feelings about this as well. But it is what it is. Here we are. This reminds me of something my former defensive coordinator, Norm Parker, used to tell us, that kids do what they want to and adults do what they have to. And I think we're at a point right now where we got to do what we have to, even if it doesn't settle well.
All right, Jayme, thank you so much. I think, in a nutshell, the big thing that we want to get out of tonight, and we will talk about it at the end, is making sure that no matter what happens moving forward, that us as the Minnesota Youth Basketball Alliance and the collective community, we really come together and figure out what we need to do. So when we come out of this after these 4 weeks or whatever it may be, that we really are strong and we are buttoning things up, and we're making sure that those people that have made the youth sports look bad, the ones that did not want to comply will comply, or they just can't be around it. And we need to establish those consequences. So Jayme, if anybody has any other questions, feel free to email me. His email is there. Again, this is not his full-time gig. But but he has been, because their state agency, the Minnesota Amateur Sports Commission, has been kind enough to be that liaison, or the people that are organizing it. And he's been awesome. So Jayme, thanks again.
Thanks, everybody. It's a pleasure.
Okay, moving on. So we are extremely fortunate to have the next gentleman on, Dr. Jim Borchers. He is the longtime Ohio State team doctor, and he, fortunately, because he can pass along some knowledge to us, he is somebody that was on the return to play and one of the co-chairs for the return to play for the Big Ten football, or Big Ten in general. And he's with the U.S. Council for Athletes Health. We have launched a partnership with them. You've heard of maybe the Game Day Ready app, but he is here to basically talk about, okay, here's some things that we can do as a collective youth basketball community when we return, things that we can do to be stronger. So Dr. Jim Borchers, it's a pleasure that you're with us tonight, and thank you so much.
Austin, thank you. And Jayme, thank you for those comments. Also, as a physician and with a master's in public health and 25 years of experience dealing with athletics, and know how important they are to communities. And as another former Big Ten football player, knowing that Jayme also shared those dreams and passions, we know just how important it is to have sports for young people. You know, this is a really challenging time, and you just heard from your governor this evening, and you heard from Jayme some of the challenges, but sports in general are critical to young people's development. They're critical to overall health, as you just heard. They're critical to mental health. And just by way of discussing some of the data that we know about, you know, one of the biggest issues we've seen with this pandemic and the cessation of sports in particular is the mental health of athletes. And it's really important that we give youth athletes the opportunity to not only learn how to communicate and interact with their peers through sport, to compete through sport, to have the opportunities to learn all of life's great lessons that leads them on in sport. And so we certainly at the U.S. Council for Athletes Health advocate for making health and safety a priority so that athletic organizations can go forward and meet all the priorities for their athletes. And so, Dawson, thank you for the opportunity to speak here tonight. There are a couple things that are really extremely important in the next few weeks as you think about returning to sport. And one of them that was already mentioned here tonight is thinking about a very consistent behavior, an education pattern as you move through the next 4 weeks that prepare you for this return to athletics. We know that the successful return to sport is founded not in testing. It is not founded in, treatments or the things that we're hearing about that we use to take care of patients. It is founded in education and changing culture around that event to make it safe. We know from looking at data that the actual transmission, as you heard, in the sporting activities themselves is very small. We know that most of the transmission around these events happens with the congregating of individuals in close quarters, what goes on socially after these events and such. And so it's really important that we understand what those behaviors need to be moving forward. But to Dawson's point, there needs to be clear and consistent pattern to that behavior, and that's one of the things that we hope we can provide some guidance on if that's the case. The other thing that's really important is to model that behavior for your kids, because we know at every level of sports, behavior modeling is accepted from anyone who happens to be someone that either an athlete looks up to or a position of authority. And so it's been extremely important at the collegiate and professional level, for example, to get coaches and other folks to buy into all of the things that need to be done so that players will buy into it. And that really helps athletes then buy into that culture and allows them to participate. The good news about this virus is that we will get through this. I think we need to have some positive messaging. We know that right now is really hard. We are going to get through this. There are things on the horizon that are going to help us get through this, and there are things that are going to allow us to return to the things that we want to be able to do. But we're only going to be able to do that in the near future if we follow behavior patterns that allow us to do those things. And so we're very committed to helping organizations understand what those are, what those behaviors are, and how to actually make certain that they happen. And so we're really excited to be able to do that. The other thing that's really important is to understand that you have to make decisions based on facts. You can't make decisions based on opinions. And so very often in working with your alliance and the MYAS, our experts will help them to understand what the facts are. We'll help them to understand what the facts are with your organizations and how you can get very granular and understand the facts and look at those facts to make really good decisions moving forward. And so I think that that'll be part of a successful return to activity as we think about moving forward here in 4 weeks. But the one thing we can't do for the next 4 weeks is do nothing. We have to think about preparation, and quite honestly, those are lessons that have been learned by many organizations, in that every day we need to think about how to prepare to allow athletes to get back to doing the things that they want to be able to do, and to know that in the short term it will not look normal. It will not look how we're all used to having it look, but it will look that way again, and we should obviously strive to get there. So with that, Dawson, I know there's been a lot of discussion around COVID. I know there's been a lot of discussion around what's going on in your state, but quite honestly, in states all over the country. And I certainly would like to leave a couple minutes if you have questions or specific things that I might be able to answer for you. But just to know that certainly we are looking forward to being able to partner and collaborate in any means possible to help your athletes get back to the sport.
All right, thank you, Dr. Jim. I think really quick, if people want to ask questions in the chat, that's great. But I think the one thing that I want to make sure to pass along is we're proud to be partners with the U.S. Council for Athletes Health, and with their expertise on return to play and things that they can help build up for us. We want to make sure to obviously utilize that partnership. There are people on this call tonight that are part of our MYAS Basketball Board of Advisors, and we're going to lean on them because they are leaders from 30 different associations across the state, and they have a lot of years of experience. I'm looking at two of them, and Mr. Randy Olson and Mr. Jim Davison, that I think that with utilizing Dr. Jim and Craig Perry and others, that we can kind of together create something for the Minnesota Youth Basketball Alliance and the basketball community. So that's the main reason why. And obviously with Dr. Jim's expertise, it's very important. So the stuff that you talked about, Dr. Jim, is there a way that you could get that, the things to think about, the things that you mentioned earlier, that we could get out to these leaders so they can disseminate that out to everybody within their programs, that while this pause is happening, here's things that we all need to think about?
Absolutely. Yeah, we will work with you, Dawson, and make certain that we get checklists and those sorts of things so that they can be delivered to folks, so that they can have those ideas and what they should be thinking about in these next 4 weeks around behavior, around how to conduct events, how to minimize spread, how to keep fans safe, how to keep athletes safe, and how to actually go about having sport, with the most data-driven, safe approach. And so we'll definitely get that available to you.
And I think the other big thing is the understanding for the athletes, the parents, coaches on the before and after, not during only. And we keep talking about, but it's these things that goes along with what you said, the education on things that they need to understand that are not good, that are not going to help them continue to be able to play the sport they love, that they need to make sure to do their part. This year is going to be way different because of the virus, that we can't do the fun things like going out to a restaurant afterwards, or doing sleepovers, or other things that people love to do as teammates. It just can't happen this year.
Yeah, I think, Dawson, one of the questions in the chat here real quick is how do we keep our athletes connected and working out and staying safe during the pause? And I think one thing that's really important is to keep young people exercising. I know if you have kids, and as I do, it's a struggle to keep them away from the couch and the video games and those sorts of things. So being able to within your household to keep them engaged in as much as you can, but also using things like this medium to keep them connected with their teammates, to challenge each other, to do certain things, to create a team-like environment. And one of the things that we've learned through this is we can do some of that virtually. Almost all sport organizations now are using platforms like the one you're using here tonight for meetings, for team building exercises. And so there's lots of ways to keep athletes connected so that they can be ready to perform when this comes 4 weeks from now. And so again, we'll be working, I know, with Dawson to get some of those thoughts out to you as they're requested to help do that.
Okay, anybody have any other questions for Dr. Borchers? Again, it's great that we have somebody with like U.S. Council for Athletes Health that's committed to assisting us as a Minnesota youth basketball community. There's a lot of things to think about right now. And I know right now we're trying to figure out, well, how are we going to get back to play? Well, we got to make sure that we get it set up so it's safe as possible as we get back to that point. And in the meantime, I can relate as a 6th grade basketball coach at Irondale Basketball Association for my daughter. We're trying to figure out ways, just like Dr. Jim said, on how to still connect, because we just got into the season. We were starting to get into the practices and we played a tournament. It was great. But now you can't just deflate that because they all look forward to that. So like you said, creating team building and things like that. So we will work with Dr. Jim and Craig, and we will get stuff continued to, again, as a resource, assistance in things that you can pass along to the people within your association. So Dr. Jim, thank you so much for being on tonight.
Thank you. Everyone stay safe and healthy, and happy Thanksgiving. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Okay, we're going to move on really quick. And this is something that I kept on the agenda because I know that some people that were looking forward to administering their basketball tournament over the next 3-4 weeks, they were, I guess, upset tonight because they can't do it now. And I know there's a couple people on here that we had asked to talk about best practices and things that they found out on how things were successful and safe at the same time. I still think it's important for these individuals to at least have a moment. They've had a lot of years of experience doing this. And obviously, like everybody else on this call, this was a very awkward time for everybody, and especially running a large basketball tournament. So I'm going to turn it over first to Randy Olson, the president of Chaska Basketball. And I'm going to allow him just to share a couple things that may help you within your association, even as you move forward, even if you don't have the ability to run your tournament this year. But again, please take what you can from the best practices that Randy found. So Randy, thanks for speaking tonight.
Yeah, thanks, Dawson. And I'll be brief and concise. So the first thing I'll say is we got very fortunate, and Deb will probably confer with this, but weather was fantastic. So there was nobody who was objectionable about staying outside a little bit longer and distancing outside. So that worked out in our favor. So we got very fortunate there. The other luck we had with the tournament is we had 2 teams cancel the morning of. Happened it was a 10-team bracket, and both teams had buys. So we were very fortunate in how we had to rework the bracket. That worked out really well. But backing up from there, we started communication, as all you I'm sure do, with community ed around our event really early this year. And we decided to cap our event at 120 teams. We're typically 140 to 150 in each one of our boys and girls tournaments. So I have responsibility for both boys and girls. Our boys is always early out. We're normally the first week in November. That's normally around 150 teams. We capped that at 120 this year. with the thought that we would keep a court open. So at both high schools, Chaska and Chan, we have 6 courts between the two. At each one of those sites, we kept one open, and that was where we kind of flowed traffic in and out of the facility. In terms of volunteers, that was different this year. We didn't have concessions, obviously. We didn't take cash. We were phasing into the no gate fee model. So we were a little higher team fee, and then a Saturday only fee that everybody paid electronically in advance. So effectively it was a gate fee that we had them pay in advance. We did an electronic waiver for every player, every parent, every ref, every volunteer that entered the facility. So volunteer wise, we had ushers outside keeping kind of courts in order. We brought teams in to we have large commons at both high schools. We spaced them by team in separate spaces. So at max, they were 10 to 12 people in that large space that they had. We had gotten guidance from our district that we could have 12 spectators per team. We actually dialed that back to 10 with the thought that we'd have a few more volunteers to help with traffic flow. So we brought players in 20 minutes in advance. We asked parents to get prepared at 10 minutes of advance to enter the facility. So we moved players first by court, team at a time, with an usher. We had a court monitor on each one of the courts that had exited the court previously. We did a quick refresh and clean of everything, and then we entered everybody in that way. So entrances and exits were different. Flow was one way all the way around. We used those empty courts kind of as traffic flow in and out of the courts that they were playing on. And feedback was fantastic. There was a lot of smiles. Again, weather doesn't hurt. It never hurts to have that kind of weather where people show up in a good mood anyway, but everybody was very compliant, 100% mask compliance. And I will say after the fact, we've had just a few folks let us know that midweek or so, they had a positive test or they were exposed, in which we did the appropriate, kind of follow-ups around that. So, it was the chaos was much less. I think, the tournament environment's always fun, but it was much less chaotic. It just, everything kind of flowed. So we're happy we got it done. Again, blessed with weather. We got blessed with teams that dropped. We happened to be in places we could easily redo that bracket. And then, I'll say Jayme and Rich and Dawson support from MYAS was fantastic. It was first year for us using Tourney Machine. We had used a different tool in the past, so we got a lot of support out of that. It worked really, really well from a bracket perspective. So, it's doable. I think it's doable safe. I hope we get back to that here in January. So unless there's questions, I'll turn it over to Deb.
Did you do anything with electronic forms for waivers?
Yep. We did. The form was electronic, so we, set that up with just a little electronic tool. Got that out to everybody in advance. They had to get that in advance, so we tracked all that. We had separate kind of spreadsheets for each team, and we're able to track waivers against that spreadsheet, and then also the officials. We're able to track waivers against the officials and our volunteers. So, yep.
Do you happen to recall the tool that you used for that?
I believe it's called Cognito Forms.
Okay.
I can send you a link to it. I can send you a link to our waiver itself. You want to look at it?
Sure. All right, Randy, thank you very much for
Yeah, thank you.
providing some input. Deb, I'll forward this on to everybody that's on the call, but if you want to just maybe for a minute or two, we're already at 8:18, just kind of highlight a few things.
Yeah, so I agree with everything that Randy said. Just a couple of additional things. We extended our game slots to 70 minutes to allow time for the teams to exit and the spectators to all exit the building. and then for us to sanitize the court before the new teams entered. So that was something new that we did this year. We also went to 20-minute running time halves with stop time just the last 2 minutes of the second half. And that really kept us on schedule, so that was good. We redesigned, similar to what Randy mentioned, we redesigned our volunteer deployment because we had, we didn't really need admissions people beyond the first day check-in for people to get their wristbands. All of the wristbands were purchased ahead of time, or we did have some or reserved ahead of time. So our admissions folks were also ushers, I suppose, and helped people stage outside and then bring people in smaller groups to avoid congestion by the entry. So that was helpful. We also invented a new role of a court monitor. So the court monitors kind of watch the courts just to remind people if needed about mask compliance, remind players of wearing masks on the bench when they were out of the game, that sort of thing. And then those court monitors also helped to usher people in and out and sanitize in between the games. And the other thing that we did differently is due to capacity constraints, usually we have OMGBA volunteers operate the clock and sit at the score table. In order to allow more spectators in from the teams, we asked the teams to provide those roles. So that was a little bit different as well, but everyone enjoyed that. We offered a free wristband for that, and then the actual teams provided those volunteers. So that was helpful. I agree about Turning Machine. We used Turning Machine. It was great. It was easy to use. It let us make changes on the fly. We did have more cancellations or team movement. One thing I would say is maintain a wait list because you'll need it. So have people or teams ready. Communicate with those teams on your wait list the week of as you hear information from different teams. And then just echoing the communication, finding ways to email the coaches ahead of time. I put some frequently asked questions on the website probably later than I should after I got a lot of questions. So, but that would be a good thing to put out there proactively, with tricky changes or things like that. We had lots of signs around. We had printouts at coach check-in. We had printouts on the bench. Just lots of reminders throughout the weekend about what the expectations were. And we had worked with our facilities and our district ahead of time to make sure that we were all on the same page with what those expectations were and how we were communicating that. So, yep, I mean, it went well. We had, just with anything, we had most of the people were very happy to be playing, very positive about the experience, happy to comply with any COVID guidelines that we had in place. There were a few that, resisted or forgot at times, and that was fine. A quick reminder seemed to rectify the issue. But, I think it's important for all of us associations to set expectations, as has been mentioned on this call, about what returning to play means, and make sure that everyone understands that and is I guess abiding by the guidelines and regulations so that we can get back to it. So
Deb, that is a wonderful segue. Thank you. I appreciate that. So thanks both to Randy and Deb for sharing that. It was a great test for Jayme, who's been intimately involved in the Turning Machine and the other stuff, and it was a great kickoff because you guys were willing to work with us, on stuff, and we learned a lot from the early tournaments too. That whole system is flowing very nicely and very streamlined. There are still a few things, but everything's going great on that end too. So, all right. With that being said, so the next thing and the last thing, because it's 8:23, and I said that we'd be done at 8:15. So, like Deb said, like I've said, moving forward, we need to make sure over the next few weeks that we are extremely proactive on what we do as a youth basketball community. So I'm going to turn it over to Jayme, and he's going to talk about very quickly what we had learned from a survey we sent out this week when we didn't know at the time that there was going to be necessarily an executive order that went into place tonight. And then I am going to really quickly, before Jayme talks, I'll really quickly talk to you about what our stance is at MYAS. After hearing or understanding the executive order, we made the decision, because remember, our tournaments that we administer have always been supplements for your local invitational tournaments, because we've always been very hands-off, and we want you all to be successful in your fundraising mechanism. So we have supplements for those organizations that maybe don't have reciprocity with different organizations around them. And our winter shootouts have fulfilled that need. And we had some decent numbers the first few weeks for us. And we did it in a very safe way. We did it in a very controlled way with 2 or 4 court facilities, and it worked wonderfully. But with the news tonight, we have decided to pause all of our tournaments, even through the 18th, 19th weekend, or the 19th, 20th is that Saturday, Sunday. And we didn't have anything really else on the schedule. So we have decided that we are not going to start any tournament operations for us as MYS until January 9th, unless we hear otherwise from the state. We're not saying that that if something else happens that you guys as organizations cannot do that, but we would highly recommend that everybody in the Minnesota youth basketball community really thinks about trying to put a tournament on December 19th and 20th, which I really don't think is possible, because I think, like Jayme said, we're going to be dealing with what we all dealt with at MYS on the baseball side in the spring. And it's going to be a dialed approach that we're going to hopefully get back into a practice setting. And then hopefully, based on what these last 4 weeks or these next 4 weeks show us, we can get back into some competition within the, the second or third weekend of January. So somebody asked the question about, hey, what do you think about, or what's your guidance or recommendation on practices on Thursday and Friday? I'm not going to be the one to tell you guys what you can and can't do, but I would say that as a model for for our youth and for the adults, I would highly recommend you not having it. But again, that's up to you and your association and your community ed or school district on what you're doing within your community. So I'll turn it over to Jayme, and he can talk about some things related to what we saw in the survey and what our next steps will be to make sure to collect as much information and data as possible, so we can really have one big collective expectations and ramifications or consequences when we move forward.
Thanks, Das. Yeah, and a really quick recap of the survey that we sent out on Monday morning. It went to all 120 lead contacts for our Minnesota Youth Basketball Alliance members. And there was basically 4 options in there. And the 4 options, the first one was continue basically as we are, with the COVID-19 safety guidelines in place. Second option was to continue running tournaments with additional restrictions such as no spectators. Third option was to pause all competitions starting November 23rd and resuming tournaments on January 9th. And with this option, we asked if they thought it'd be a good idea to, or it was added in there that practices could continue. And the fourth option was to pause November 23rd, begin tournaments on January 9th, and not allow any practices until January 4th. Again, this was all sent out prior to any communication from Governor Walz that there was going to be the dial back that we're seeing right now. And that first option was basically kind of how the votes came in. The most voted for option at 55% was to continue with how things are now. And the second option at 24% of the first place votes was to pause on November 23rd and start tournaments again on January 9th. So now we're under this whole different set of guidelines here, and we'll obviously adhere to what Governor Walz has put in place with the pause. The big thing right now is, it's been mentioned a few times throughout this discussion this evening, is that we have to figure out a way to continue to do this safely. It's been said that, once we get to the tournament, once we get to the practices, for the most part, things are done safely there with the mask compliance and the distancing and that sort of thing. But it's really the stuff on the periphery, the sleepovers, the carpooling, that sort of thing. So what we're gonna do is we've created a survey through SurveyMonkey. I've included the link in the chat, and we're also we'll send out an email to everybody as well. So you can go in there and provide your feedback. But basically we're looking for some additional guidance that we can add to our safe play back to the hardwood guidelines. Just to tighten things up. Things were going good. I think everybody, some people may have gotten a little COVID fatigue, and some things were lightening up, with the different actions that people were taking. As Dawson mentioned, we did go through this summer in our baseball programs, and we became well aware that state of Minnesota Department of Health was monitoring what was going on. And we had to send a notice to all the coaches and association leads that we better get our act together, or a potential shutdown was possible. So the big thing is, we want to come up with this additional guidance that we could add to our guidelines, recommendations to keep people safe. But also, if there's any ideas on how we can track this, or possibly even penalize the individuals or associations that aren't adhering to those guidelines. I know that's quite the task, but that's why we're looking for you guys and gals to help us out with it. So please take a couple minutes to complete that survey, and then let us know what you're thinking. We'll continue to build out that safe play back to the hardwood set of guidelines for you.
Yeah, thanks, Jayme. I guess the other thing to mention again is the whole thing that we all have the ability, just like the waivers and things like that, to have, we do code of conducts within our organizations. Is there a way that we can establish a Minnesota Youth Basketball Alliance pledge related to COVID-19? That they understand that if they don't adhere to it, that there are going to be consequences for their actions. I mean, unfortunately, we have to hit people where it hurts. And if it's going to have to be, well, your team is suspended, it is what it is. We have to figure out a way to make sure that this sinks in for everybody moving forward with whatever it is. And I know it's tough for the association leaders to police what's happening within each team before and after, for example. But I think it's very important that information is really hammered home to the coaches, because, again, I can relate. I love to coach my daughter's team. They are so much fun to coach. But that can't happen if everyone does not adhere to the guidelines that are put in place and these expectations that need to make sure to be done. So I don't want us to ramble on too much, but I want you all to know that we are going to be extremely proactive. There are amazing leaders on this call that I have great respect for, that we are going to make sure to accelerate this process and get out in front of it. We have a lot of great resources that we can utilize that will help us kind of button it up. But we originally were going to meet on December 6th with the MYAS Basketball Board of Advisors. Our hope is that we can maybe get something in before Thanksgiving, because we really need to get their assistance and their guidance. We're going to do our work and due diligence on our end. The other thing that we've thrown out there, and this is all just speculation, if things get pushed back enough, is there a window where we can provide opportunities for people to reschedule later in the season, and then maybe we potentially push back our grade state. I don't know. It's all up for discussion. We don't want to obviously push it too much into the quote unquote spring season or club season, but for us to get our fair opportunity as community-based associations, we need to make sure to get the tournaments necessary in if we can, if we're kind of hamstrung right now and cut short. So again, we are committed to making sure that we all together, because I believe that there are right now probably 60 some associations represented. And at the time we had almost probably 70 that were on at one time. So we have a large number right now. And I know everybody's trying to look for answers. We will get as much information out as possible. If you don't see something from us, please send something to us. Please say, we need to have a better understanding of this. Do you have information that you can make sure to get to us so we can get out to our participants? Are there things that you guys have found are very successful within your organization that we can share as a best practice across the board? Because again, we've heard this a lot and we've been using this hashtag, but we are stronger together. We are, truly. So I guess I'm going to leave the last couple minutes here. Is there anybody that has a general comment that they would like to pass along to the full group before we leave tonight? Okay. Again, I hope this was helpful, and maybe it wasn't enough information that you were hoping for, but I think not everybody has the answers, and we don't know after December 18th what's going to happen. It is something that I think what I'm trying to get at is, from what I've heard from Commissioner Tomes and what I've heard from the National Sports Center, Minnesota Amateur Sports Commission, and these other sports groups, is if we don't do what we need to right now, we won't get back to competition as quick as we want to, because we're not going to show that we are going above and beyond to make sure to keep everybody safe when we get to that point. So we will make sure that we, again, are communicating with you, and that we get meetings together with everybody that we need to make sure that we have something in place as a youth basketball community. So again, everybody stay safe, stay healthy, stay home when you can. As much as you can. Have a wonderful rest of your evening, and thank you for your time and dedication to youth basketball.
Thanks, Dawson.
Thank you.